Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The clock ticked past midnight as I stood in front of the mirror, heart pounding. My girlfriend's silky black dress hung loosely on my small frame, the hem brushing against my knees. I ran my hands down the smooth fabric, marveling at how different it felt compared to my usual t-shirt and jeans. This wasn't the first time I'd tried on her clothes, but it was the first time I'd dared to do it while she was out of town. The apartment felt both liberating and suffocating as I twirled, watching the dress flare out around me. "What are you doing?" I whispered to my reflection, a mix of excitement and shame coursing through me. At 5 to 6, I'd always been on the shorter side for a guy, but in heels I felt tall, powerful, and strangely right. I'd been suppressing these feelings for years, stealing moments like this when I could. But as I stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living a lie. The sound of a car door slamming outside made me jump. Panic set in as I scrambled to take off the dress, hanging it back in the closet with trembling hands. By the time my girlfriend's key turned in the lock, I was sitting on the couch in my regular clothes, pretending to watch TV. "Hey, babe," she called out, dropping her bags by the door. "Miss me?" I forced a smile, trying to calm my racing heart. "Of course. How was your trip?" As she launched into a story about her weekend away, I couldn't focus on her words. My mind was still in front of that mirror, in that dress, feeling more like myself than I ever had before. Weeks passed, and I continued my secret explorations. Each time my girlfriend left for work, I'd rush to the closet, trying on different outfits, experimenting with makeup I'd secretly bought. But the guilt was eating me alive. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet apartment. My mother's voice on the other end was broken, barely above a whisper. "Your father, he's gone. Heart attack." The world tilted on its axis. My father, the stoic, traditional man who'd always pushed me to be more manly, was dead. As I sat there, phone still clutched in my hand, a strange sense of relief washed over me, followed immediately by crushing guilt. The funeral was a blur of black suits and hushed conversations. I stood there, uncomfortable in my ill-fitting suit, feeling like an imposter. My girlfriend squeezed my hand, mistaking my discomfort for grief. As we lowered my father into the ground, I made a decision. Life was too short to live a lie. I couldn't waste another moment pretending to be someone I wasn't. That night, after everyone had gone home and my girlfriend had fallen asleep, I sat down at the computer. With shaking hands, I navigated to an online forum I'd been lurking on for months. It was time to take the plunge. I created a new post. "Short guy looking to explore feminine side. New to this. Any advice?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then quickly closed the browser. Sleep didn't come easy that night, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. The next morning, I was shocked to find my inbox flooded with responses. Some were creepy, others were kind, but all of them were encouraging. One message, in particular, caught my eye. "Hey there. I remember how scary it was when I first started exploring. If you want to chat or need any tips, feel free to message me. Jess." I spent the next few days exchanging messages with Jess, soaking up her advice and experiences. She told me about safe places to go, how to shop for clothes discreetly, and most importantly, how to start accepting myself. 2 weeks after my father's funeral, I made another decision. I would dedicate the next 2 years to exploring my feminine side. No more hiding, no more shame. It was time to discover who I truly was. The first step was the hardest, telling my girlfriend. We'd been together for 3 years, and I knew this could end everything. But I couldn't keep lying to her. I sat her down one evening, my palms sweaty and my voice shaking. "I have something important to tell you," I began, unable to meet her eyes. She listened silently as I poured out everything, my secret dressing up, my online explorations, my plans for the future. When I finally looked up, expecting disgust or anger, I saw only confusion and concern. I don't know what to say, she said after a long pause. This is a lot to take in. I understand if you want to leave, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head. I don't want to leave. I love you. But I need time to process this. Can you give me that? I nodded, relief and anxiety warring inside me. It wasn't a perfect response, but it was better than I'd hoped for. Over the next few weeks, we had many long, difficult conversations. She asked questions I didn't always have answers to. There were tears, arguments, and moments of tender understanding. In the end, she decided to stay, at least for now. I can't promise I'll be attracted to you as a woman, she said one night, her hand gently squeezing mine. But I want to support you on this journey. You're my best friend, and that doesn't change. With her cautious blessing, I began my exploration in earnest. The first step was building a wardrobe. Jess had advised me to start small, so I ordered a few items online: a simple black skirt, a flowy blouse, and a pair of low heels. When the package arrived, I waited until my girlfriend was out before tearing it open. The clothes were nothing fancy, but as I slipped them on, I felt a sense of rightness I'd never experienced before. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing myself. The skirt hugged my hips, the blouse softened my angular shoulders, and the heels gave me an extra boost of height. For the first time, I saw the woman I'd always felt I was inside. Tears pricked my eyes as I twirled, watching the skirt flare out. This was me. This was who I was meant to be. But wearing the clothes at home was one thing. Going out in public was another challenge entirely. I spent weeks practicing walking in heels, perfecting my makeup technique, and working on my voice. Jess was an invaluable resource, always ready with advice or a kind word of encouragement. Finally, after a month of preparation, I felt ready for my first outing. I chose a quiet Wednesday evening, figuring the streets would be less crowded. My girlfriend helped me get ready, her hands gentle as she applied my makeup. You look beautiful, she said softly, a mix of emotions in her eyes. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears that would ruin my carefully applied mascara. Thank you, I whispered. As I stepped out onto the street, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I'd chosen a simple outfit, the black skirt, a purple sweater, and low heels. My wig, a shoulder-length brunette style, felt foreign on my head. I walked slowly, hyper-aware of every glance in my direction. But as the minutes ticked by and no one seemed to pay me any special attention, I began to relax. I window shopped, bought a coffee, my voice shaking as I placed my order, and even managed to smile at a group of women who complimented my sweater. By the time I returned home, I was exhilarated. I'd done it. I'd been out in the world as my true self, and the sky hadn't fallen. This became my new routine. By day, I maintained my male persona for work. But at night and on weekends, I embraced my feminine side. My girlfriend and I navigated this new reality together, sometimes struggling, but always communicating. As the months passed, I grew more confident. I expanded my wardrobe, perfected my makeup skills, and even started using a feminine name, Emma, when I was out. I made friends in the community, attended support group meetings, and slowly began to feel like I was living authentically for the first time in my life. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of intense dysphoria, times when I looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. There were awkward encounters with old friends who didn't recognize me, and painful conversations with family members who couldn't understand. One particularly difficult day came about 6 months into my journey. I was out shopping, feeling good in a new dress and heels, when I ran into an old college buddy. He did a double take, confusion clear on his face. "Mike?" he asked, uncertainty in his voice. I froze, my heart racing. This was the first time I'd encountered someone from my old life while presenting as Emma. "Hi, Tom," I managed to say, my voice higher than usual. His eyes widened as recognition set in. What's going on? Is this some kind of joke? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. No joke, Tom. This is who I am now. I'm exploring my gender identity. Tom's face cycled through a range of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally disgust. That's not right, man. You need help. His words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been lucky so far, surrounded by supportive people. This was my first real taste of rejection. I am getting help, I said, my voice shaking. I'm helping myself by finally being true to who I am. Tom shook his head, backing away. Whatever, dude. This is messed up. He turned and walked away quickly, leaving me standing there, fighting back tears. I made it home before breaking down, collapsing into my girlfriend's arms. She held me as I sobbed, whispering words of comfort and support. That night, as I lay in bed, I questioned everything. Was I making a mistake? Was this just a phase? But as I thought about how right it felt to be Emma, how free and authentic I felt in those moments, I knew I couldn't go back. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed determination. One person's ignorance couldn't erase months of personal growth and self-discovery. I got dressed, choosing a pair of jeans and a flowing top, and headed out to face the world again. As the first year of my journey came to a close, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come. I was more comfortable in my skin than I'd ever been, even if that skin was sometimes covered in foundation and blush. My relationship with my girlfriend had evolved. We were more partners than lovers now, but our bond was stronger than ever. I'd even started considering more permanent changes. The idea of hormone therapy, which had once seemed terrifying, now felt like a natural next step. I scheduled a consultation with a gender therapist, ready to explore my options. The day of my appointment, I dressed carefully in a pencil skirt and blazer, wanting to present a professional image. As I sat in the waiting room, leafing through a magazine without really seeing it, I thought about how different my life was from just a year ago. The therapist, Dr. Ramirez, was a kind-faced woman with graying hair and a gentle smile. So, Emma, she said as I settled into the chair across from her, tell me about your journey so far. I took a deep breath and began to share my story. Dr. Ramirez listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights. By the end of the session, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't expected. Based on what you've told me, Dr. Ramirez said, I think you would be a good candidate for hormone therapy if that's the route you want to take. But remember, there's no rush. This is your journey and you get to set the pace. I left her office with a prescription for estrogen and a head full of possibilities. But I didn't fill it right away. Instead, I spent the next few weeks researching, talking with my girlfriend, and really considering if this was what I wanted. In the end, the decision felt right. The day I took my first dose of estrogen was both terrifying and exhilarating. I knew the changes would be gradual, but I felt like I was finally taking a concrete step toward aligning my body with my identity. As the second year of my journey began, I noticed subtle changes. My skin softened, my body hair thinned, and I began to develop small breasts. Each change brought a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was really happening. My girlfriend watched these changes with a mix of fascination and trepidation. We had long talks about the future of our relationship, both of us aware that we were entering uncharted territory. I love you, she said one night, her hand resting on my chest. But I don't know if I can be with you romantically as you continue to transition. I'm just not attracted to women. The words hurt, but I understood. We cried together, mourning the end of one type of relationship while celebrating the strength of our friendship. As my body changed, so did my confidence. I started going out as Emma more frequently, even during the day. I joined a support group for transgender individuals, finding comfort and camaraderie in shared experiences. One sunny Saturday, about 18 months into my journey, I decided to attend a local Pride event. I spent hours getting ready, finally settling on a colorful sundress and strappy sandals. My hair, now grown out to my shoulders, was styled in loose waves. As I walked through the crowded streets, surrounded by rainbows and smiling faces, I felt a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before. People of all genders and orientations mingled freely, celebrating their authentic selves. I struck up a conversation with a group of women near a food truck. As we chatted and laughed, I realized with a start that they saw me as just another woman. There was no confusion, no double takes, no awkward questions. I was simply Emma, and that was enough. Later that day, as the sun began to set and the celebrations wound down, I found a quiet spot on a park bench. I watched the diverse crowd, tears pricking my eyes as I thought about how far I'd come. 2 years ago, I was a scared, confused person trying on dresses in secret. Now I was sitting here, comfortable in my own skin, part of a community that accepted me for who I was. The journey hadn't been easy, and I knew there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly, authentically me. As I stood to leave, a young person approached me, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear I recognized all too well. "Excuse me," they said, their voice shaking slightly. I saw you earlier, and I just wanted to say you look so confident and happy. I'm just starting my journey, and I'm terrified. Does it get easier?" I smiled, reaching out to squeeze their hand. "It does," I said softly. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it. You're at the beginning of an amazing journey." They nodded, tears in their eyes. "Thank you," they whispered before disappearing back into the crowd. As I walked home that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I felt a profound sense of peace. My journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But I was no longer afraid. I was Emma, and I was finally home in my own body. The next few months brought new challenges and triumphs. I decided to come out at work, a process that filled me with equal parts dread and excitement. I'd been with the company for 5 years, and while they had policies protecting against discrimination, I knew that policy and practice didn't always align. I scheduled a meeting with my manager, Lisa, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who I'd always respected. As I sat across from her, my hands twisting nervously in my lap, I took a deep breath and began to explain. "Lisa, I have something important to tell you," I started, my voice shakier than I'd like. "I'm transgender. I've been transitioning for the past 2 years, and I'd like to start presenting as female at work." Lisa's expression remained neutral as she listened, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished speaking, there was a moment of silence that felt like it stretched for eternity. Finally, she spoke. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Emma," she said, using my chosen name without hesitation. "I appreciate your honesty, and I want you to know that you have my full support. We'll need to speak with HR to ensure a smooth transition, but please know that your job is secure." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until that moment, and I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Lisa smiled, a rare softening of her usually stern expression. "You're a valued member of this team, Emma. Your gender doesn't change that." The process of coming out at work was smoother than I dared to hope. HR was supportive, helping to draft an email to the entire office explaining my transition. Most of my coworkers were accepting, even if some seemed a bit awkward at first. There were, of course, a few whispers and sideways glances in the beginning. I overheard one coworker in the break room speaking in what he thought was a hushed voice. "I just don't get it. How can she, whatever, just decide to be a woman one day?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself before turning around. "It wasn't a decision," I said calmly, meeting his startled gaze. "It was a realization. I've always been a woman. I just didn't have the words or the courage to express it before." The coworker, Tom, had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't mean to offend. This is all new to me. I nodded, understanding his confusion, even as it stung. I know it can be confusing. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. But please don't talk about me behind my back. I'm still the same person you've worked with for years, just living more authentically now. Tom nodded, looking thoughtful. Over the next few weeks, I noticed him making an effort to use my correct name and pronouns, even correcting others when they slipped up. It was a small victory, but one that meant a lot. As I settled into my new reality at work, I found myself facing a new challenge: dating. My girlfriend and I had officially ended our romantic relationship, though we remained close friends. She had even started dating again, and while I was happy for her, it made me acutely aware of my own loneliness. The idea of putting myself out there as a transgender woman was terrifying. I'd heard horror stories from others in the community about discrimination and even violence. But I also yearned for companionship, for someone to share my life with who would love me as my authentic self. After much deliberation and encouragement from friends, I decided to try online dating. I created profiles on several apps, being upfront about my transgender status to avoid any potential misunderstandings or dangerous situations. The responses were mixed. There were messages from fetishists who saw me as a sexual curiosity rather than a person. There were kind messages from people who weren't interested romantically but wished me well. And there were a few genuine connections that led to dates. My first date as Emma was with a woman named Rachel. We met at a quiet cafe, both of us nervous and a little awkward. As we talked, sharing stories over lattes, I found myself relaxing. Rachel was kind and curious, asking thoughtful questions about my journey. I've never dated a trans woman before, she admitted halfway through our date. I hope you don't mind me asking questions. I want to understand and make sure I don't say anything hurtful unintentionally. I smiled, appreciating her honesty. I don't mind at all. I'd rather you ask than assume. And please feel free to tell me if I'm oversharing. This is all new to me, too. We ended up talking for hours, long after our coffee had gone cold. While there wasn't a romantic spark, we parted as friends, and her acceptance gave me hope for future dates. Not all of my dating experiences were as positive. There was the man who seemed perfectly charming until he found out I was trans, at which point his demeanor changed completely. You should have told me up front, he spat, despite the fact that it was clearly stated in my profile. I don't date men in dresses. His words stung, reopening old wounds of self-doubt. But as I sat there, watching him storm out of the restaurant, I realized something important. His reaction said far more about him than it did about me. I was not a man in a dress. I was a woman. Full stop. As my confidence grew, so did my involvement in the transgender community. I started volunteering at a local LGBTQ+ center, offering support to others just beginning their journeys. It was healing to be able to offer the kind of guidance and acceptance that had been so crucial to my own transition. Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.